Welcome back to our Elul Reflections 2024. Elul is that month before Rosh Hashanah in which we prepare ourselves. We engage in teshuvah, in return to our true selves, in return to right relationship with other people, and in relationship to God. And so instead of just turning up to services on Rosh Hashanah and saying, "That's it, I'm ready to atone," we really reflect on who we are and where we may have gone wrong or what we need to change. Maybe that's a better way to put it. What we need to change in ourselves and in the world around us so that we can draw closer to our true selves. And throughout the month of Elul this year, our Elul reflections come from this wonderful book, Enter These Gates, Meditations for the Days of Awe by Alden Solovy, whom, as I mentioned before in previous Elul Reflections, you can hear an interview with him in my Soul Searching podcast in all the usual places. Last night was a full moon, and that means there's only 2 weeks until Rosh Hashanah. And there was also a lunar eclipse, a partial lunar eclipse. And so with that in mind, I thought this reading, called When the Light Doesn't Shine, would be most appropriate. When you feel that the light of God is not shining on you, and you feel separated from life, perhaps you must find a way to forgive yourself. This bitterness is only a corruption of the truth, that you are worthy of the breath of life, that you are the obstacle to your own glory, that you are worthy of forgiveness. There is no greater pain than to lose touch with your own humanity or your divine spirit. Let the light of God illuminate your days. Let your eyes fill with holy fire. Let your dream be for redemption and return to yourself and to your God. Let your soul thirst for glory and inspiration guide you. For your soul yearns for life, and your heart yearns to heal. I find this a really powerful reading. The idea of forgiveness. Why do we engage in forgiveness? Forgiveness ultimately is a selfish act, and I don't mean selfish in a bad way. It's an act that protects ourselves. We forgive others because we don't want to hold on to the grudges of the past. And just to be clear, forgiveness does not mean that we pretend that nothing ever happened. In Judaism, it's not so much forgive and forget, it's just forgive. Because it's very important that while we give people the benefit of the doubt, we make sure that we don't turn into a doormat for their abuse, for their negativity, if they consistently behave in a certain way. And forgiveness can only be granted if they ask for it. But here's an interesting perspective from Alden Solovy, which is that sometimes it's very difficult to forgive ourselves. Sometimes we're very hard on ourselves. And perhaps with last night's partial lunar eclipse in mind, the idea that the light of God, if you feel the light of God is not shining on you and you feel separated from life, perhaps you must find a way to forgive yourself. With last night's lunar eclipse in mind, it wasn't a total lunar eclipse, but a partial one. And for me, I find that rather important, in the sense that God's light always shines on us. It's just sometimes it's hard to see. Sometimes part of it is obscured. And if we do feel that we are in total lunar eclipse, if we do feel totally eclipsed, that God has totally hidden God's face from us, then what's really interesting about this passage is Solovy turns it over to us. Instead of saying this is Hester Panim, this is God hiding God's face from us, this is instead us hiding ourselves from ourselves, hiding the part of God that shines within us from ourselves. I think there's a very powerful statement right in the middle, that this, if you feel that the light of God is not shining on you, that's a corruption of the truth, which is that you are worthy of the breath of life. The rabbis talked of a decline in generations, that Adam was so high, lofty, was so righteous, at least before eating the fruit from the tree, that was so righteous and so huge that he could see from one end of the earth to the other. The rabbis did not believe in a spherical earth, by the way. They thought that each generation declines in goodness, in righteousness, in morality. And so it's very easy to turn around and say, well, Adam had the breath of life breathed into him, but I wouldn't have the breath of life breathed into me. But that's the opposite of what Solovy is saying here. In our morning prayers, my God, the soul that you have given me is pure. You breathed it into me. Every day, God breathes into us, renews in us our soul. And so, therefore, you are worthy, just as Adam is worthy, just as any of us are worthy. The gift of life itself is that we've had that breath of life breathed into us by God, and do so constantly. God who renews creation day by day. And that really interesting reflection of the comparison with the lunar eclipse is that two bodies, or three bodies essentially, the sun, the earth, and the moon, and one happens to be in the way of the other. The earth, for a lunar eclipse, happens to be in the way of the sun for the moon. And so there's nothing the moon can do about it. It's just locked into that pattern. Whereas Solovy is saying, if we feel that God's light isn't shining on us, we are the obstacle to our own glory. And reminds us that we are worthy of forgiveness. In other words, for me, there is no outside force. There is nothing that stops us from being worthy. We are inherently worthy by being alive. That we have the ability to choose. We could turn around and say, well, my life is bad and it was set up bad. And of course, people have difficult things that happen in their lives. But Solovy reminds us, particularly at this time, of the urgency of forgiving ourselves and removing our own obstacles. Not everything is a cosmic ballet of huge celestial bodies that can't be moved out of their orbits. In fact, in our lives, we can change a lot. And particularly during the month of Elul, we can change ourselves. There is no greater pain than to lose touch with your own humanity or your divine spirit. And so therefore let the light of God illuminate your days. Let your eyes be filled with holy fire. It's a really interesting, almost Hasidic notion. This idea that we burn with the passion of God. It reminds me of that story. The reason I say Hasidic, it reminds me of the story of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson that he shared about being a lamplighter. And our task is to go out and to light lamps, to light the souls of Jews around the world, to light up the world, infuse the world with that blazing fire, essentially, of God, that energy of God. And I don't necessarily mean to go out and convert people. I don't mean that at all, actually. I don't mean that we should be zealous in bringing people to Torah. What this means is showing in our own selves, so that when people look at us, they see the fire of God burning within us. And that's a real challenge. It can be a challenge to get out of bed in the morning. It can be a challenge to go to work. It can be a challenge to do jobs, tasks, clean the house, do the laundry. I get it. A lot of things can be a challenge, can bring us down. Solovy's saying, let's take this month of Elul, or the way I read Solovy, let's take this month of Elul to find that fire again, to recognize that every breath that we take is sacred and special and a gift. Let's not get pulled down by the negativity with which we tell ourselves, those negative messages. Yes, we need to change. Yes, there are parts of ourselves that we need to improve. But that doesn't define all of us. And the fact that we are changing, the fact that we are paying attention to the month of Elul, is what makes all the difference. So even if we feel partially eclipsed, or maybe even totally eclipsed, and if you do, please feel free to reach out for support. But if we feel partially or totally eclipsed from the light of God, Solovy suggests the first way to get that light is to forgive ourselves, to find our own humanity, to find our own worthiness, to remind ourselves that God breathes into me too, that God keeps me going too, and that must be for a reason, so we have to find that reason. The blessing before the shofar, lishmoa kol shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, finding God's light within you, and our Elul reflections will return on Friday.